Chapter 115. You are back. You worked hard. You should rest a little. They were good words. Very good words. Good words to resolve the awkward atmosphere. The third-class disciples were desperate, but unfortunately, Chongmyeong wasn't the kind of person who changed his mood to accommodate others. Rather, he tilted his head to the side. Why is he doing that again? Something good just happened. Why is he like this again? Chongmyeong, whose head was turned, began to speak. Even his voice seemed eerie and distorted. You all seem to be in a great mood, aren't you? Wow, look at everyone resting. Resting after all that trouble. I would have been thinking about going out and swinging a sword 1 or 10,000 times if it were me. Or maybe training my body with some weights and running. These third-class disciples could cope with all the harshness in the world, but they couldn't cope with this insubordinate Saje of theirs. Everyone desperately glanced at Yoonjong. They were implying that it was up to him, as Great Sayong, to save them from this predicament. You only think of me as Great Sayong at times like this, you rotten bastards. Why don't you show some respect in peaceful times too? It's not normal. But what could be done? The truth is that he is the Great Sayong. Yoonjong began to speak with an awkward smile. Why are you so angry? I think we all did well this time. Yoonjong was trying to subtly imply that Chongmyeong shouldn't be so cruel after they finally turned a chain of losses into their first victory. But that bastard didn't seem to understand Yoonjong's beating around the bush. Did well? Sayong's? Chongmyeong stared at the others. Seeing the madness in his eyes, all of their expressions darkened. You're acting like we've defeated some amazing guys, and now you're even all gathering to hold a celebration too. Aren't you supposed to be training instead of wasting time? Train! Have your life goals been achieved just because you won a conference? That's what it was. That was it. Chongmyeong covered his face and continued to speak. When I was a kid, I went to war and got stabbed, and I still got up and trained the next day. Seriously, kids these days, When did he go to war? Aren't we older than him? Isn't it good enough that we defeated the Jongnam Sect's third-class disciples? We should celebrate. Yoonjong decided to rebel and speak out, at least a little. But such rebellion doesn't always lead to good results, especially against Chongmyeong. Defeated them? Right. Well said. Just looking at them, weren't they at least 5 years younger than all of you? Are you really happy that you beat up those kids? They looked so young. How old could they have been 2 years ago? You must have been weak as shit to lose to them. Chongmyeong always knew how to stab where it hurts most. The excited air in the dorms quickly turned melancholic. If the fight went well, I wouldn't have said anything. But you twisted on your own foot and almost fell. One of the disciples flinched and looked away. How could you miss and strike the shoulder when you were aiming for their head? Another disciple flinched. The bastard who lost his cool declared his victory and rushed in only to get hit and almost lose. Chongmyeong, who was speaking loudly, almost as if to yell, waited and took a deep breath before looking up at the ceiling. I taught you all wrong. Me. Sayong's made no mistake. It's all my fault. Jogul and Yoonjong exchanged hesitant looks. What's wrong with him? How should I know? Try to fix it. Yoonjong had a dead look in his eyes as he tried to resolve the situation. Of course, there were some mistakes made, but didn't it end well? In practice, mistakes happen all the time. Mistake? Yoonjong was suddenly struck with the ominous feeling that he had said something terribly wrong. Then being stabbed and dying on the battlefield is probably just a mistake to you as well, right? Going, is this where I went wrong? That's not it. You train to avoid making mistakes in a real battle. What? It's natural to make mistakes? This is what happens when you train with such a weak mental state. All you needed to do was swing the sword properly, and you couldn't even do that. Yoonjong gave up on stopping this demon anymore. And what? Someday you'll do it properly? Someday? Chongmyeong smiled brightly. When will that day come? I wonder how you manage to drag yourselves out of bed and train each day with that mentality. You're playing around and treating this conference as just another training session? And what? Someday you'll get it right and take it seriously? Jogul smiled. Mother, I miss you. He would yell at his mother to stop nagging, but now he wanted to apologize to her. Her nagging couldn't even be considered nagging anymore. Does this bastard have a knife in his mouth? How could each word hurt so much? Chongmyeong lowered his voice. Don't be so happy. This was only the first battle. We will have to fight countless times in the future. Right now, this may be a big deal for Sahyungs, but in hindsight, it's nothing. The third-class disciples nodded their heads. Can I ask one question? Anything. If we really train like you say, will we also be able to display such swordsmanship? Chongmyung's face contorted again. Sahyungs, you seem to be misunderstanding something. It doesn't matter what you want. You will have to. Chongmyung blinked his eyes. Does it make sense for Mount Hua's disciples to be unable to display Mount Hua's techniques and make even a single flower bloom? Do you think I'll sit still and let that happen? It was strange. They were also thinking the same thing, but how can it sound so different depending on who's saying it? The third-class disciples, who were filled with motivation to unleash the techniques that Chongmyung had shown, suddenly lost the will to continue. Their eyes, which were brightly burning like the sun, quickly decayed into a dead and hopeless expression. What are you doing? Huh? Chongmyung directed them with a nod of his chin. We need to go. Are you going to skip training today? Chongmyung, the time is already... You said you wanted to learn that sword, didn't you? No, yes, but... No, Chongmyung, we aren't in a hurry to do that now. We can do it later. Are you going to come or not? The third-class disciples rushed out of the dorm. The dorm, that had been buzzing with hope, was now void of such optimistic feelings. Chongmyung watched the disciples rushing out and grinned. I can't let them get too excited. This was just the first step. It was good that this victory instilled confidence in them. But confidence often turned into arrogance. Real progress would be made when these disciples took their victories and followed them up with continuous training. He felt like he pushed them too much, but... I'm only doing this because I want them to grow. Chongmyung shrugged his shoulders and began to follow the disciples outside when someone entered the White Plum training hall. Huh? Chongmyung tilted his head at the unexpected face. What brings you here? The eyes of the person trembled. If you see your Sasuk, you should greet them first. No, such things probably don't mean anything to you. Baekchun stared straight at Chongmyung and asked, could you spare a few moments? Baekchun, climbing up the mountain's peak, snuck a peek at Chongmyung. Ugh, my legs! Chongmyung looked around and sat on a tree stump. He seemed to perfectly fit the image of an elderly man. That little jerk. You're too young to be acting like an old man. But there was no way Baekchun could point that out. Thank you for giving me some time. It's nothing. You are my Sasuk. Baekchun felt glad. But what brings you to me? To summon me to this humble place? Are you going to attack me? Although they didn't know each other for very long, Chongmyung was aware that Baekchun didn't like him. So what could he be thinking to ask Chongmyung for his time, as if there was no bad blood between them? I saw the battle between you and Jin Gum-ryung. He already worked quite heavily against you. You were overwhelming. It was nothing. Baekchun stared at Chongmyung in silence. He slowly opened his mouth after a long period. All the Sasuks are quite shaken up. At first, it seemed like they were all fine, but now, everything seems complicated. That much could be guessed. As long as they had eyes, they couldn't deny what Chongmyung did. It was also true that the third-class disciples were noticeably stronger than before. The second-class disciples were meant to serve as examples and lead the third-class disciples. However, how were they supposed to feel now that the third-class disciples had the potential to become stronger than them? No, maybe the third-class disciples had already become stronger than them. So, what are you trying to say? We want to be strong. Oh? Baekchun looked at Chongmyung with determined eyes. I don't know if you're aware, but as your senior, it isn't easy for me to come and say this. I fully understand. Who wouldn't understand Baekchun's feelings? Especially Chongmyung, who had seen Baekchun's struggles for himself. His mind must be a mess right now. For the first time, he felt sympathy for Baekchun. But no matter how much I think about it, this seems like the best choice I can make. It's not that I don't believe in my Sasuks, but what I can learn from them is different from what you can teach us. Chongmyung just looked at Baekchun. So, you're here and setting aside your pride because you want me to teach the second-class disciples by myself? Yes. Chongmyung laughed bitterly. And why should I do that? Maybe it was because of the unexpected response, but Baekchun was at a loss for words and stared blankly. It's annoying, and I don't get anything out of it, so I don't see why I should agree. I am your Sasuk. Don't we belong to the same sect? So? Have the second-class disciples been watching and guiding the third-class disciples? Or did you just leave and do your own training? Baekchun went silent. He had no response. It was true that he had never paid any attention to the third-class disciples' training. I always assumed that was Eungeum Sasuk's role and left it up to him. But haven't you already taken control of the third-class disciples' training? Why do you think that is? When Chungmyeong asked back, Baekchun struggled to respond. Why? Why? The reason is too simple. It was because the third-class disciples are the same rank as Chungmyeong. It was annoying and troublesome now, but if they were raised well, then Chungmyeong would be able to live without raising a finger in the future. Baekchun sighed deeply. You mean that you want me to bow my head? Eh? You're making me look bad. How could I dare think that? It was implied that you shouldn't say it out loud even if you understand. Baekchun hated that he understood what Chungmyeong meant. But we are still Mount Hua's disciples. Sasuk. Yes? Chungmyeong spoke calmly. Did you see the third-class disciples' training? I did. They seemed barely human by the end, more like stones rolling around. Just being alive seemed like a great achievement, but Baekchun didn't say anything. Do you think I can make the Sasuks do that? The answer was, he could definitely treat them harshly. The only reason he holds himself back is so that he doesn't get caught by others. That's what Baekchun thought, but he's a smooth talker and knew that he shouldn't say that out loud. It would be difficult since you're a good person, but I think you'd somehow manage. Yes. What bullshit? Chungmyeong just shrugged. But that's why I can't do it. I can make it work for the Sahyungs, but I can't do anything for my Sasuks. If I do, would the first-class disciples let me continue? Baekchun looked at Chungmyeong. It's possible. Chungmyeong was pointing out the problems, but he never said it was impossible. Then if all the problems are taken care of, you can make us stronger, right? Haven't you seen the results with your own eyes? Baekchun had certainly seen the results. That was why he was here. Baekchun took a deep breath. Chungmyeong had managed to train the third-class disciples to the point that they could overpower the Jongnam Sect's disciples and even defeated Jinggeumryung and the other second-class disciples himself. Not a single second-class disciple could even touch him. Baekchun bit his lip tightly. I will fix that issue. How? During the training, we won't be the Sasuks. Those who receive guidance will be the disciples, and we will respect you as a teacher. Wow! Chungmyeong looked interested, but shook his head while looking at Baekchun. That won't be enough. Why? If you curse me after the training, then there is no way out for me. Baekchun spoke bluntly. No, we wouldn't sink so low. With just one day of training, you'll change your words. Even the Sahyungs were troublesome at first. Baekchun was at a loss of words. Then what do I do? If you're going to do it, you need to make it clear. Chungmyeong snapped his fingers. If you want to learn whether it's time to train or not, you'll have to bow to me. Then I'll help. But if that doesn't work, then I can't do a thing for you. I need to be able to live here as well, you know? Baekchun agonized, but not for long. Do I have any pride left? It was disgraceful to bow to a Sajil, but it was a greater disgrace to be weak. And I want to be able to display that sword one day. The sword that destroyed Jinggeumryung. Mount Hua's sword was branded deeply into his memory. Fine, Baekchun answered firmly. From this moment on, you aren't a Sajil for the second-class disciples. Your title may be Sajil, but none of the second-class disciples will attempt to use that against you. I guarantee it with my name on the line. Gotcha! A happy smile crept onto Chungmyeong's lips. He was thinking about how he could catch these idiots, but they jumped into the net with their own feet. Really? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Alright, then everyone will gather and come out tomorrow morning. What? No, never mind. Baekchun would only realize later on what a grave mistake he had made.